We did it.
You did it. It's always fun when it happens on the first try.
Very bad at this stuff, so I'm always amazed that I am able to click the right button.
I totally feel you because even though I've done so many of them, it doesn't always work. So it is an exciting day when it does.
Absolutely.
Yes. Well, thank you for making the time to join us today. And before we even jump in, because I know we have so many questions and I don't even think we're going to get through half of them today because such an important topic, lots to talk about, but we'll definitely start to touch upon it and hopefully leave room to have a bigger conversation to continue. But before we even get there, do you want to take a minute to introduce yourself to the Yesh Tikva community?
Sure. Such a pleasure to be with you, so thank you for having me. My name is Jarret Zafran, and I live in New York City with my husband and 2 daughters, and I am a lawyer by training. But a few years ago, I quit my law firm job to start a surrogacy agency after the law here in New York State finally changed. We became the 47th state to allow compensated gestational surrogacy. And the new law did a lot of interesting things that we can get into if it's of interest, but it inspired me, along with my personal experience, to start Brownstone Surrogacy. So I'm the founder and executive director, and we manage surrogacy journeys.
Amazing. So I guess we're going to start with, tell us a little bit about a surrogacy journey. What are, I know it's a very big question to ask, so I don't know if there is a starting point of where you want us to start with, or if we should just kind of give a glimpse of what that looks like for an individual who is considering surrogacy, a gestational carrier, as their path to parenthood.
Yeah, I mean, it ends up looking different for everybody, right? So sometimes people will come to me and they don't have embryos set at a fertility clinic yet, and they're trying to figure out that piece. And oftentimes they come to me after years and years of trying on their own. And it really depends on people's personal circumstances. Are you turning to surrogacy because of recurrent loss? Are you turning to surrogacy because of a cancer diagnosis? Are you turning to surrogacy because you knew that within your relationship, couple, individual, you didn't have a uterus to begin with, and this was always going to be the path to biological parenthood? And so, that is its own adventure that I think is a nice euphemistic term of what came before I even first meet intended parents. And then the journey with me is often, more than a year, sometimes more than 2 years. And we're talking about copious amounts of money. We're talking about complex insurance, legal paperwork, both a contract and the parentage process. And we're talking most fundamentally about a relationship that is unique, that is truly unlike any other relationship that you will ever have in your life. Asking somebody else to carry your child, it requires an immense amount of trust and an immense amount of alignment on things that you would never think to discuss with a veritable stranger at the outset, like termination selective reduction, like genetic abnormalities and testing, like collaborative medical decisions, labor and delivery preferences, not to mention how are we going to communicate? How are the things that I'm carrying into this process going to manifest in the way that I think about attending appointments or diet and lifestyle changes? So there's just the number of things that come up in that relationship. I think I could sit here and try to create a list, and it would take me days to still not cover everything that really is involved in that relationship between an intended parent and a gestational carrier. And we're here to matchmake, to sort of do the shidduch, and then to support both sides throughout the entire process and be an intermediary and facilitator as needed.
Amazing. So you're describing a process that takes about 1 to 2 years on average, which could mean a little longer, a little shorter, depending on the individual. But in terms of this matchmaking shidduch that you're describing, is that an experience in your experience? Is that something that usually happens very quickly, or is that the piece of the process that takes the longest?
I wouldn't say that takes the longest, but it certainly is a big part of why this overall takes a while. Every agency has its own wait times. A lot of that depends on clinic guidelines and personal preferences and requirements. And so if somebody comes to me and says, I want to work with an experienced surrogate who's only ever had vaginal deliveries and lives within an hour driving distance of me, and et cetera, has usable insurance so that I don't have to take out a new policy and will accept, a low compensation, that's going to be a long wait. If they can say, I am very flexible and I will make it work if they are clear across the country and have never done this before and have had prior C-sections and I don't need them to be COVID vaccinated, that is a different circumstance. And it ends up settling where, I have clients that I've matched within weeks of them signing, and I have clients that have waited over a year for that surrogate match. And then from that point, we still have many months between match and getting to an embryo transfer, during which we are forming contracts, working on insurance, finishing out the medical screening process at the clinic and the psych screening process. And some of this is timed around a menstrual cycle. And so, that itself can take 3, 4, 5, 6 months. And finally, there's the pregnancy, which hopefully that first transfer took. And hopefully that first pregnancy is successful. And we have about 8.5 months left. But at every step of the way, the matching process, the legal process, the clinic clearance, the transfer, things happen, and folks that are not acting as surrogates, miscarriages happen, transfers fail, and so unfortunately, none of this is a given, and there's a limit to how much is within any of our control.
Sure. So getting in, I guess we're going to focus for a minute on the gestational carrier and then on the intended parent's family. For the gestational carrier, what requirements must they meet in order for them to become gestational carriers? Are there basic requirements that are, I guess, for you in New York, that are legally required, or does each agency have their own?
So it depends on the state. In New York, there are legal requirements. Clinic requirements are usually above and beyond whatever's written into the law. The very baseline are these guidelines set by the American Society for Reproductive Medicine. So if you hear ASRM as an acronym, that's what is being referred to. And so the ASRM guidelines are ages 21 to 45, a BMI generally up to like 35-ish, that the carrier has had at least one prior full-term uncomplicated pregnancy, that they are financially stable, that they have a good support system, that they're emotionally stable and can pass that psych evaluation. But then most clinics and agencies go above and beyond that. So for us, our age limit ends at 42. Our body mass index limit ends at 32, which is where most clinics are. And so ultimately, the clinic is the true gatekeeper. Mm-hmm. And the role of the agency is to try to vet a surrogate so that she's going to pass muster at your fertility clinic and that we know what there is to know about this person. And so, what the process entails is quite a lot. And if there's one misconception as to who surrogates are, it's that they're financially motivated. And honestly, if people knew what a surrogate was going through, the months they spend screening, and then all that they're going through even after they're matched with the parents, before they even see a dime of compensation, that notion would immediately be thrown out the window, because we are reviewing all of their pregnancy records, all prenatal and labor and delivery records. If they've been through fertility treatments, we're going through those records. So we have our own OB on staff who's doing that. We're doing background checks, criminal, civil, and motor vehicle, and not just them, but any adult that lives in their household. If they live with their mother-in-law, I'm checking the mother-in-law. We ask for a credit report. We meet for an hour and sort of both educate, but also probe, what does your support look like? Is your work flexible? Who have you told in your life that you're going through this? that if their partner, their spouse or partner needs to join for that. Their spouse or partner needs to also join for psych evaluation. So every surrogate and their spouse goes through testing, usually something called the PAI, as well as a clinical interview with a psychologist that is going to ask them all sorts of things. They cannot be on SSRIs generally and can't be managing any serious mental health illness, especially one that hormone shifts can trigger, because our first principle is do no harm, and that is both about physical health. Is there a possibility that this pregnancy is higher risk for her because of a prior history, but also mental health? If she had postpartum depression in the past, that is something that should be a disqualifier for a surrogate. So we are testing them in every which way to make sure that they understand what they're getting into. The physical risks, the emotional risks, the effects on their family, the effects on their day-to-day life. If they're placed on bed rest for an extended period of time, what does childcare look like? What is work going to do? So there's a lot that goes into it before we get to a match.
And you mentioned the importance of the psych evaluation. Is that something that is both done on intake and then repeated closer to when the process actually begins, once a match is made before a transfer, or is it done once and the assumption is that nothing has really changed over time?
They're valid for a year, and every agency and clinic does this differently. For us, I like to do the psych evaluation of a gestational carrier and her spouse or partner, as well as what's called the psychoeducational consult, which is not education, but is a meeting for the intended parents. I try to do that pre-match so that I also have the benefit of this nice report the psychologist sends me. It's chock full of insights as to how best to match these people. I learn even more about them and their experiences and what they're bringing into this process. And then, if the match goes forward, the 3 or 4 of them would meet again with that psychologist for a joint meeting. Sometimes clinics do want to repeat it. They have in-house providers that they want to use, but typically we do it as one of the last stages in the screening process so that it's still current by the time they get to the clinic.
Amazing. And then to parallel that, what kind of testing, what evaluation requirements do you have of intended parents before you agree to work with them?
Yeah. So again, this is program specific, and for us, we do require that our intended parents have some sort of demonstrated need for turning to surrogacy. So, it's our policy not to take a truly social or elective case. People use different terms. But, the vetting on the intended parent side is not nearly as extensive as the surrogate side, but we do run background checks, criminal, civil, and motor vehicle on every intended parent in our program. We make sure that they go for that psychoeducational consult, and if there's any indication that they would not be able to treat a surrogate with respect, that would be a reason we wouldn't move forward. And if there's any reason to believe that there truly is no need for a gestational carrier, that would be a reason at least we would not move forward. Although there are certainly agencies and clinics out there that will gladly sign them up and continue.
Thank you. We had a wonderful question here is, what is the right language to be using when you're referring to those involved in the surrogacy process? I know that we have the term surrogate, we have the term gestational carrier. What are there other terms? What is the correct term to be used?
Everybody has their own take on this. Surrogate used to refer to a genetic or traditional surrogate where the person was providing an egg and also carrying the pregnancy. At this point, that's, I think, less than 5% or so of surrogacy cases in the United States. And so in my mind, surrogate now refers to a gestational surrogacy process. But if you're in the medical community, they tend to use gestational carrier or GC. I think surrogate feels a little warmer to me personally. Carrier, I think, feels clinical and feels it does not live up to the sacrifices and the emotional component that these women are going through. And so I tend to turn to surrogate, and rarely does anybody say, like, don't call me a surrogate, I'm a gestational carrier, but everybody has their own preference. I think yeah, I'll leave
So
it there.
essentially, both work, and in your opinion, surrogate is the warmer term to use.
I think so. The one that I don't use, but you still see all over the internet, is surrogate mother, and it's not to take anything away from their own status as a mother, which 99.9% of surrogates are. It's just that even if there's not an intended mother, if I have a gay male couple and there's two intended dads, it's still, I don't think it lessens the sacrifice and the burden that a surrogate goes through to say that she's not the mother, because I define it based on intent. And that's why we call intended parents within the surrogacy world, is that you intend to parent this child. And so it's not about genetics, it's not about carrying, it's about the fact that you want this child, you intend to parent this child, you are this child's parent, and then that's defined in the law. And we know starting at the outset, before an embryo transfer even takes place, that a gestational carrier or surrogate does not intend to parent this child. So I don't use the term surrogate mother. I think it affects our SEO on the internet if people are Googling, because a lot of people Google surrogate mother and we don't pop up. But
that makes a lot of sense of why the intentionality here was never for that individual to be a parent to this child. Thank you for explaining that. We have a lot more questions. I'm going to cap it at 2 more, if that's okay.
Sure.
Okay. Another interesting question that we receive is, I know we spoke right now a lot about the process of what it means to go through this process to be matched up with a gestational carrier or a surrogate, but what happens when you know that individual? Can one bring a family member or a friend through this process? And what does that look like? What are the legal ramifications around that? Does this, and maybe this is a very complex question, so maybe this is the last question, depending on how long it takes to answer. But are the legal requirements by the state the same, by the clinic the same, and by the agency the same for being matched with working with a gestational carrier that isn't someone that you're being matched with, but rather someone that you bring?
Yeah. So the answer is it depends, which I feel like betrays my former life as an attorney, because lawyers answer always it depends. But it does depend. In some cases, yes, it can be a little different. So, for example, if that friend or family member is not being compensated, then some of the pieces of the New York law don't apply. And actually what they call compassionate, altruistic, I call uncompensated surrogacy, was possible in New York even before the change in the law. So, some of that is different. Clinics tend to be a little bit more flexible in accepting a known surrogate, a friend or family member who, again, is sort of, there's a relationship there that pre-exists, because the idea, I think, is that your doctor's looking out for you and they're being very stringent and conservative with all of the requirements, thinking that you're spending $50,000 in base compensation alone on this individual. And then if they hear, well, it's a friend or family member, maybe the gray area becomes a little bit grayer. But as a general matter, if you're doing this the right way, that person should essentially go through the same process. You want to make sure that the relationship that you have going into this is not going to be harmed. And so the psych counseling is even more important when there's a known relationship, because not only do you need to be on the same page about all the things that are important around termination and selective reduction and labor and delivery preferences and lifestyle and communication and all the things that are always important, but now there's an added family dynamic, friend dynamic, overlapping social circle dynamic, and it may not be all rainbows and butterflies for you throughout this process. And so if there is a failed transfer, if there is an early miscarriage, or God forbid something worse, that was not that there's relative, I didn't mean to anyway, I make mistakes too in the way I speak about things still. But point is that you want to make sure that not only is there a contract in place, just like you would with somebody who starts out not known to you, but that the psych counseling is not shortchanged in any respect. But then otherwise, it would be the same process. They would be vetted by your fertility clinic as long as they met the clinic's guidelines and seemed like a good candidate to carry another full-term, uncomplicated pregnancy. Then you would form contracts and proceed from there.
Oh, thank you. That was
no problem.
I think we're gonna end with this last question. On average, if one were to decide to go through the path of paying for a surrogate, what is the average cost in America today to go through this process?
Yeah, it depends. To give you a number, just to sort of be in your head, I think a good estimate for a surrogacy journey through an agency with a compensated surrogate is about $150,000, and not including clinic fees in that. So whatever you pay to your clinic for embryo transfer and embryo creation, and we all know that the fertility clinic piece itself is tens of thousands of dollars often, at least before employer and insurance benefits kick in, if you're lucky enough to have them. But that $150,000 makes a bunch of assumptions. It's assuming an agency fee of $30,000 to $40,000. Some agencies are more expensive, some are not quite as expensive. It assumes a surrogate's base compensation of around $50,000, and that varies. There are reports of surrogates receiving over $100,000 these days, and there are still some that will sign up as compensated surrogates, and their base comp is closer to $30,000. And then, insurance can vary. Does she have usable insurance that she comes into this process with, or do we need a new policy? What does travel expenses look like? What happens throughout the journey? So lost wages. Does she work a job where she makes over $200,000 a year, and because of a pregnancy complication, she is out of work for 4 months, and you're contractually obligated to pay those lost wages or not? So,
that's beyond what you're saying is the 150.
That's right. I'm just saying like 150 is sort of an average, but if it's if she's a stay-at-home parent and there's no lost wages, that's one thing. If she, makes six figures and has a complicated pregnancy and now, and no short-term disability policy, it gets very complicated. I try to not ramble on and on and on, but the point being that while 150 is a number I can give people that is easily sort of kept in their head, in reality, the number of things that are outside of our control or that we don't know until I talk to an individual about their personal circumstances is frankly dizzying. And so I shy away from making any sort of guarantee or promise that the costs will bear out in a certain way. Legal fees I didn't even talk about, usually about $10,000 between an attorney for either side on contracts and parentage, and there's some simple estate planning that people need to do. So, all right, I'll stop myself there though.
And you mentioned this twice, and that I guess we didn't really clarify. When you speak about her having insurance, the assumption is that not all insurances are going to carry a surrogate pregnancy as opposed to if it were their own pregnancy. How does one ensure that they know these stipulations before going into this process? Because I'm sure that makes a big difference in a price differential if you're paying for health insurance, an additional health insurance above, versus if an individual would have health insurance that would cover them through this process. And whose health insurance does this child, once they're born in that hospital, fall under? Is it under the gestational carrier, or is it under the intended parent's insurance?
So the last part is very easy to answer, and the newborn always goes on the parent's insurance.
So there's no added insurance coverage needed there.
There might be, especially if they're international parents and they don't have a U.S. policy to which the newborn can be added, then they're looking at purchasing a new newborn insurance policy through one of these companies like a Lloyd's of London, or there's a Chinese company called Great Morning. So that gets very expensive. So, but usually if you have like Aetna or Blue Cross or something through your employer, you just call your insurer when the baby is born and say, hey, I had a child, let me add this child. Or that's also a qualifying life event, and you can take out a new insurance policy at that. To ensure the actual pregnancy, we need the surrogate to have surrogacy-friendly insurance. And you were exactly right in your question. Not all policies are friendly. A lot of them will write exclusions into the policy booklet, basically saying, if you are being compensated to carry this pregnancy for somebody else, we, the insurance company, are no longer covering your pregnancy. And so you're catching me at the very end of open enrollment.
Right.
And we try to exploit the open enrollment period to use the Affordable Care Act exchange and surrogate states to put a surrogacy-friendly policy in place for them. We have experts review her insurance policy booklet if we can get it, which is sometimes you have to chase down HR or the insurance companies to get that policy booklet. But once we get it, we have a third-party expert like Art Risk Solutions or IFI review the policy booklet and make their assessment as whether it's friendly or not. So that really can make a huge difference, because maybe you're just hitting her out-of-pocket maximum and it's only a few $1,000s for the whole pregnancy and labor and delivery, but maybe you're reliant on a very expensive Lloyd's of London backed plan that is really catastrophic insurance that only kicks in when you're more than $20,000 into medical expenses. So huge discrepancy there.
Right. And it's definitely something really important to think about. And I noticed a nuance in what you said, if you are being compensated. So based on that, I would assume that if you are an altruistic, as you called it, surrogate, then your insurance would cover it regardless.
Depends on the insurer, but I mean, honestly, it's not a given. If you're doing this for the benefit for somebody else contractually, and it's legally going to be their child, there are insurers that would treat it the same regardless of compensation. I think all surrogates are acting with an altruistic spirit, so I tend to refer to the other type as uncompensated.
Sorry, and uncompensated.
I mean, we have to be so careful about our work with everything, and you know this better than everybody, and I'm guilty of not always choosing my words so carefully.
No, I'm with you, and you're right to give up 9 months in service of usually a complete stranger is nothing short of altruism. So, and as you're explaining, and as most individuals who are ending up needing these kind of services understand that no pregnancy is guaranteed, no transfer is guaranteed, and this is a process, both, I'm sure, emotionally draining for the gestational carrier who so badly wants to help a family in need. So yes, I'm with you. And apologies for
no.
Yes, but yes, I hear you. And we just got one question, and I know that we're going long over time, so apologies for that. But someone wanted to know if you provide Jewish surrogates.
They are a needle in a haystack. So I do. We have one surrogate who is matched, who is Jewish, and we have one that is in screening right now who is Jewish, and that is a rarity, as you might expect. So I certainly cannot make any promises, nor really an estimate on timeline if that ends up being a requirement for clients. It's sort of your guess is as good as mine when the next Jewish gestational carrier is going to apply. But sometimes they exist. They certainly do.
Amazing. Do you have one last thought or tip or piece of advice you'd like to leave individuals who are pursuing surrogacy as their path to parenthood?
Yeah, I would say that I think everybody is emotionally prepared for it to be a long haul, that nothing is quick about this. And I think there are so many decision points along the way. And I'm a big researcher. I'm a big fan of feeling confident in your decisions and researching things and knowing the options and all of those things. But at the end of the day, there's a sort of gut instinct that needs to play an important role in this, because otherwise you could hit decision paralysis. And there are so many little micro decisions along the way, from insurance to choosing a lawyer to choosing an escrow agent to like, can I trust this person to carry my child? The biggest decision of them all within the process. And I really think there's a sort of like gut impression that takes over that people should trust. And as much as I am the sort of researcher type, the optimizer, not the satisficer, my husband likes to just say good enough. And I'm like, no, I need to know what's out there. But in this process, at a certain point, you just need to say, some of this is out of my control. And if I feel good about this, let's proceed.
That is a beautiful piece of advice. And I think that something that from everything that I'm hearing from you is that it's a trusting in the system, that the system is intended to support you, not to hurt you. And at a certain point, it's not just the believe in your gut, but it's trust the system.
That's right.
Because it really is, it sounds like, both legally by the state and hopefully with most agencies that you work with, a system meant to help you, not hurt you.
Yes, I think that's right. And, you know, you're going through psychologists, lawyers, your reproductive endocrinologist. You know, there are a number of gatekeepers, checks along the way. And so, yes, trust the process.
Amazing. Thank you so much for taking so much time to really dig deep and explain this process to us.
It was my pleasure. And if anybody has, you know, specific questions that we didn't answer, they know where to find me.
And Allison has been working, I know, with your help to create digital resources as well to take some of this information and make it accessible as well in digital form.
There's a lot of demystifying we need to do. So I appreciate your efforts in helping people understand.
And thank you. Thank you so much. Have a wonderful day.
You too. Take care.